So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Owen, and he will introduce Nick to you. So thank you very much, Owen.
Hello, everyone. Hello. Firstly, thank you everyone for joining. It's amazing to have so many people. We did a talk last week. It was a massive success. This week is exactly the same. It's amazing to have everyone kind of engage in these topics about water access. So yeah, thanks for joining. Just to introduce a little bit about who I am, if you weren't on the talk last week, I am a team member at the Outdoor Swimming Society, where I do access campaigning, inland access. So basically, we're all allowed to swim in the sea, so we don't really need to campaign for that. Inland is all the rivers, lakes, reservoirs, all of those spots inland, and we try and help people establish new swim spots. And then I also run SOUP, which is Sheffield OUtdoor Plungers. It's a Facebook group, been going for 4 years. We're just about to hit 7,000 people, and pretty much everywhere that we swim is not allowed. In fact, since I've been doing some research for this talk, I've realised that literally every single spot that we swim at, we're not actually allowed to swim there. There is no clear access that says you actually can swim here, and there is stuff that says you cannot. Just a reminder, if everyone wants to turn their camera off, when this goes up on YouTube, we have to blur everyone's faces out. It just makes it a little bit easier if everyone can turn their camera off. Thank you. At the end, we can all put them back on and put your microphones on, and we can all have a shout on the screen then. Yeah, so just to kind of give you a little introduction to Nick Hayes, I'll just grab his book. So this is the Book of Trespass. Nick is an illustrator, and I think he'll probably tell you a bit more about himself now. Yeah, Nick, tell us a little bit. How did you get started on your journey with Trespass?
First of all, thanks to you guys for having us on. That's really kind of you. Yeah, to give this a platform, and obviously to everyone for taking the time out of your evenings to be here. I spent the last 10 years as an illustrator, just doing regular jobs for magazines and book covers and stuff. But all my life I've drawn, and all my life I've gone outside to draw. And I suppose I became kind of embroiled in trespass laws and subsequently like the history of private property and how what once was common land somehow turned into the individual property of other people. Just by the need to draw, really, just by going out into the woodland with a sketchbook and you know, maybe getting tired of drawing the one right of way that went through a 200-acre woodland and nipping, there wasn't even barbed wire, just nipping over the imaginary line to draw a tree and incurring the wrath of countless different people, not just gamekeepers, but never the landowner themselves, actually. I still never met the landowner of that particular place. And that's what got me into it, just wanting to draw something other than this one line through the woodland that I was allowed to, I suppose.
Where was that then? Where did you just kind of, like, just a brief little overview, like where did you kind of grow up, where have you lived, and where are you now?
Oh, I'm from down south, I'm afraid. I grew up in West Berkshire, in the countryside, pretty deep countryside, and yeah, I just spent all my life there growing up, I guess, messing around in the woods when we were 8, and then making fires in the woods when we were teenagers, and then I guess when I was a bit older, going there on my own, and gradually through all these different ways kind of developing quite a deep relationship with really just that one patch of woodland that you know, woodland changes every single day pretty much, so there's, you know, one cinema screen and just 1,000 different films to see on it, basically. So down south is the answer.
And so not only have you written this book, but you've also started with Guy Shrubsole, who wrote the book Who Owns England. So you guys together have started the Right to Roam campaign, which is it's kind of in its early days at the moment. You're just trying to like get people on board, get people's email addresses. Is that right? Do you want to tell us a little bit about the Right to Roam campaign and what the actual aims of it are?
Yeah, I'd love to. To be honest, for me, it's just 1,000 times more important than the book. The book just on a pragmatic level, was just a really good way of getting publicity, really. Like, the papers all wrote about it when it came out, and we got 10,000 signatures practically in the first week to our website. And now individual podcasts like this just allow me to kind of, I guess, kind of explain, first of all, that we don't see ourselves as vandals or a threat to the countryside as such. We see ourselves as people that just actively love nature, but also actively care for it, you know, pick up litter, sort of conduct surveys, like ecological wildlife surveys. Like, we're a broad church of people that just have a desire to connect with nature. And the book was just this wonderful springboard. I met Guy about 5 years ago at a conference for the Land Justice Network, which seeks to do a whole load more raft of measures, you know, land value tax or community ownership. In England, very radical moves that would, you know, bring a bit more social equity, not just through wealth, but also through health to the people of England. But we met there and both kind of admitted to each other that we were in the early stages of writing a book. We went on loads of walks together. I'm in, you know, half of the walks on his book, and he's in some of the ones in mine. And we've remained good friends. And the ambition of the campaign is not to ape the Scottish right to roam, but actually to use what we've already got. We've got a framework. It's called the Countryside and Rights of Way Act. But currently, as it stands, the 8% of land that we're allowed to, you know, public access to, is by and large in fairly remote areas of England. So it really, what we're looking to do is to bring the Crow Act, as it's called, closer to people's doorsteps, so that they can enjoy the physical, but also, as science has proved, the myriad mental health benefits of jumping in a river, or sitting by a river, or soaking up the essential oils of trees, otherwise known as going for a walk in the woods, which itself has been proved to raise your immune system for up to 30 days after the bathe, as they call it, the forest bathe. So we see all of these aspects of nature proving how it can not just improve our health, but also our kind of sense of community and our sense of rootedness and belonging to a space, and a sense of what we owe in terms of responsibilities to our community, including the environment. So we're campaigning to open woodland, greenbelt, rivers, and the remaining downland, say in Sussex, that for some reason or another just hasn't been completed, as was the initial ambition of the Crow Act. So hopefully we're looking, we're trying to persuade people that we're trying to be reasonable. There's so much nature out there. There's so much open space, especially following the lockdown and, you know, within the pandemic that we're in at the moment. This idea of social distancing or immune systems, or like our need to be outside, has become so much more obvious and much more viscerally felt by people, that we think, just like the end of the Second World War, when a right to roam was actually presented as part of the kind of welfare suite that was offered to England, but also the UK. They saw giving people the right to autonomous exercise, to go out there, and if you like climbing, go and climb. If you like swimming, go and swim. They saw the right to roam as a kind of sister to the NHS. The right to roam would allow you to govern your own health, and the NHS would catch you if you fell, essentially. And it just seemed like such a wonderful vision. And of all of the suggestions, the radical suggestions, the welfare state, pensions, the NHS, it was the landowners in the House of Lords that put their foot down on the right to roam. And instead, the national parks were created, which later on were termed honeypots, as a way of describing essentially really what they were designed to do, which is to funnel the swarms of English holiday makers into designated picnic spots or natural beauty spots, in order that we could forget about the vast thousands of acres like hidden behind brick walls.
Yeah, I do know. I'm going to show in a minute. I was going to show a little map and help explain exactly what access land is. But I was going to like, I know when I was kind of advertising this event and sharing it through different Facebook groups, like we had a lot of people say things like, I don't think we should be promoting trespass, or I don't think we should be promoting trespass in this swimming Facebook group, or this whatever it is. Like, we were having a little chat before we started this, like the word trespass to some people, it's a bit like, you know, vandalism or mugging someone. You know, it's like it's quite, for some people it's quite a visceral word that means something really bad, and they don't want to be involved in it. And I think like we maybe want to explain a little bit about what trespass actually is and why the whole kind of the notion of it might be a little bit twisted. But yeah, I tell you what. But before we get on, I'm just going to show, because we were talking about access land, and I just want to. I know that not everybody looks at OS maps, so I was just going to share my screen, and I can kind of explain a little bit about what access land is. So you should all be able to see my screen now. So this is what access land is, as you talk about the CRO Act, the Countryside Right of Way. This is where we have the right to roam. Often people think we have the right to roam as in we can just go wherever we want. You can do that only on access land. And that is basically this beige outline that you can see around the edge. This beige outline, and then everything in the middle, that's what access land is. That's where we have the right to roam. And you generally see this little sign, this little brown man in a field, and that means you're on access land. And then when you're at the edge of it and you're leaving it, you might see a sign with a red cross to it to tell you you're no longer on access land. And then talking a bit about like the distribution of access land. So the green on this map of the UK is access land, and the brown lines, that's to show that the national parks. So you can see there's huge amounts of access land, but it's probably almost like the complete opposite of where people actually live. So you know, as you say, like us in Sheffield, we're quite lucky. We have quite a bit of access land in the Peak District, but down in the south, like I currently work in Surrey during the week, and there's very little access land down there. And anyone who lives in general the south, the Midlands, anywhere away from what's currently deemed access land, doesn't have access to true right to roam. So that means that you are restricted to where there's a public right of way, a footpath, which is what, 1.5 meters wide. So yeah, I just thought I'd kind of explain that so that everyone's on the same page. I know we've got walkers, we'll have swimmers, paddlers, you know, kayak, canoe, stand-up paddleboard. So hopefully this talk can be like, we can kind of have everyone on board, including people who don't much get out with an OS map. But what would you say? So what are your like kind of frequently asked questions? Because I'm going to tell you right now, what people have said to me is, oh, you want the right to roam, so how would you like it if I came and walked through your veg patch? So what do you say to that?
That's number one. That's what we've had a sea of that in, and that's easily responded to. Tell me the others first, though, because there are three main ones that we found.
Yeah. Well, I guess, like, who are you to do that? You know, who are you to go on someone else's land? And then other things like, you know, you're gonna ruin it, you're gonna vandalize it, trample on people's crops, leave a load of litter, and who's gonna pick it all up afterwards? And you know, this is a place where people take care of that land, and you're going to stop them or compromise the work that they do. That's kind of the gist that I get. I don't know about you. Is that your three?
Yeah, by and large, I mean, it's expressed slightly differently over Twitter, of course. Just to deal with what you were saying before, like the word trespass, I go into it in chapter 4 in the book because it does carry this kind of whiff of almost eternal damnation to it. It's for something that probably most of us in this call at the moment have done and probably quite recently, it sort of occupies two areas. Something that's kind of a little bit situated in Last of the Summer Wine, with an old 70s sitcom with a irate farmer chasing Compo and Cleggy over the fields. But then also it's got this kind of Latin Mass Catholic kind of fear of damnation to it, which does sort of stem from the origins of the word. If you are a vagrant, that describes someone that is walking in a place where they're not allowed to be, and you can still be arrested by the 1824 Vagrancy Act. But also vagrant is another example of a word that carries a kind of moral baggage with it. You're a moral vagrant, you're not to be trusted. And certainly the 1824 Vagrancy Act was also used to arrest homosexuals and prostitutes, sex workers. So there's this weird bleeding from almost the actuality of straying over the line to this kind of metaphorical being a bit queer, or being not straight up, or not being okay. And
yeah,
so
on the straight and narrow.
There's countless phrases in England that sort of presuppose that the line is where you're supposed to be, and anywhere else of it is, you're beyond the pale. Is another. I go into all of these in the book, kind of thing, mainly because I find it fascinating. But you're right. There is this sense that trespass carries with it this sense of maybe even the word, the word roam in Right to Roam. If someone's roaming, they're either like a mobile phone network, or they're kind of probably a burglar or something like that. It's got a very sinister kind of vibe to it. The right to ramble doesn't really cover it, so we stick with the right to roam. But so there's this sense that the public are not to be trusted in the countryside, and certainly, I'd be blind if I tried to pretend that lockdown hasn't brought with it countless examples of people, disposable barbecues, piles of nitrous oxide gas, like tinnies, £10 tents from Argos kind of thing, just strewn all over the Peak District. There is evidence that people treat the countryside badly. But once again, what the book tries to do, and what we hope to prove with our Right to Roam campaign, is that there are reasons for this. We FOI'd the government just a couple of months ago, and for the last 14 years, they've spent £2,000 a year promoting the Countryside Code. Now, £2,000 will barely pay for storage for a box of leaflets kind of thing. So really, they've spent negligible amount of money, no money on promoting the Countryside Code. Back in the 70s, you were taught the Countryside Code at school, and most likely you were taught the Countryside Code, and then you were taken out into whatever patch of country your teacher could take you in, and allowed to teach yourself the Countryside Code. At our campaign, we're firm believers of the Countryside Code, but we don't think it goes anywhere near enough. One of our ambitions is that there are so many different ways that we could approach the litter problem or the vandalism problem, and every single one of those ways, and I hope we'll maybe get more specific about it later on, every single one of those ways will not just benefit the ecology of the landscape, but also the community of the landscape. There's an amazing guy called Dom that runs Trash Free Trails, which is a mountain biking community down in Cornwall, and he's doing his PhD on the mental health benefits of literally just picking up a piece of litter. It's the camaraderie, it's the sense in this kind of devastating, quite abstract enormity of climate change. There's a sense that you can go into the woods, or as I do on my kayak, just and haul out great big sort of dirty bits of decades old tarpaulin and get rid of them from the river, and you really feel like you've done something. But this myth that the public constitute a threat to the countryside, it ignores one, that once, if you do go into the countryside and you leave no trace, you've literally left no evidence of you leaving no trace. And by and large, the majority of people that go out into the countryside do so because they adore it. They might specifically like birds, or they might specifically like insects, or they might like climbing or swimming or fishing, whatever it is. We've all got our little sort of prism into nature that fascinates us. Mine currently, I'm living on a boat in Bath, a boat in Bath, and some old boy in West Berkshire taught me how to basically straighten the sticks and then turn them into hooks and cap them with a brass cap. And stick making sounds stupid because there just are sticks all over, but it's quite an art. And I've got back into that, and you just wander through the woods upside down looking for the perfect shepherd's crook. There's so many reasons why we sort of want to interact with nature. The real problem here is that there's just so few places where we can actually do that without this sense that we're doing something wrong. And it's not even the people that say, do you want me coming in and camping or having a barbecue? I was on the Vanessa Feltz show, and there was a very irate lawyer because I mentioned my mum in the first chapter of the book. That's like the first time that we were ever kind of rudely accosted, was me and my mum going for a walk, trying to see the kingfishers that I'd seen down on the River Pang. And this lawyer was just going on about my mum saying if Mr. Hayes and his mother came climbing over my fence, kind of thing. And every single right to roam legislation across Europe protects the sanctity of people's personal private space. It's even a human right to have the right to your private sanctum. And in Scotland, Estonia, Finland, Norway, Sweden, all of the places that allow their public to wander responsibly, but also autonomously throughout their beautiful countryside. Number one, head of the responsibilities is not to go anywhere near someone's private dwelling. In Sweden, you can't camp within 70 meters. In Scotland, it's just defined as a reasonable distance. In Norway, it's 150 meters. So really, that sort of initial complaint that you're talking about is just the result of misinformation. But the problem is, this misinformation is in some ways a deliberate act. It's kind of the other side of the coin that's of noblesse oblige and land stewardship. This idea that to really care for a piece of land, you have to be the landowner. No one else has any say over how land is managed, and no one else has any right to contribute to the management of the land. Just today, I found out that a farmer, we used to go to this spot in Wales, in Fairborn. It's kind of an electric blue lake because it's an old copper mine. And the farmer had blocked off the entrance to it because he was so frustrated with the litter that was left in lockdown. And on the one hand, that's completely understandable. He owns this place, and most likely his family, you know, for generations before have owned that place. And all of a sudden, there's this explosion of kind of plastic material that's being left there. But we would basically, over the next couple of years, we're going to demonstrate, hopefully successfully, to the public that that's the wrong approach. Number one, in Scotland, that farmer wouldn't have had the right to block off people's access. But also, number two, in Scotland, there would have been a framework for people to have gathered together and have cleared up that litter themselves as a community, in essence, to earn their right to roam by exercising their responsibility towards the land and their landowner.
Yeah, Scotland. Sorry, I was just going to go on. Oh, go on. Go on.
No, just the last point is we don't blame the landowners for feeling this way. We don't blame property owners, whether you've got a small suburban garden or whatever. We don't blame them for feeling that, because the way the law is structured, trespass resides under the law of tort, which is the same as libel. It's any kind of damage towards someone that must be sorted out through common law in civil courts. But the problem is that the law itself in England doesn't differentiate between me hopping over your fence while you're having a barbecue with your family and setting up a camp there. It doesn't differentiate between that, which is clearly a home invasion, and me going for a swim in the Duke of Wellington's river, which is called the River Loddon in Hampshire, which his stretch of it is over 8 miles of river. There needs to be a sense of scale. There needs to be a sense of how desperately the public need regular connection with nature. And there needs to also be strict codes that govern what our responsibilities are to the ecology when we're in it. Very simply, put the river first. And there's really nothing else to it, but you know, the rest is detail.
Do you think, like sometimes there's concern with swimming or boating? It's always kind of put as this thing of, if you're not going to drop a load of litter, then you're probably going to disturb all the wildlife and cause a problem for the birds, insects, fish. Do you think this is fair? Do you think it's proportional? And kind of, yeah, how do you feel about that, and how we should navigate it?
Well, the Environment Agency have twice proven and published reports proving that kayaking specifically does not damage fish. It doesn't scare them off, and it doesn't damage their spawning. But still, the anglers have almost set up this kind of binary. The anglers are like Manchester United, and the kayakers are like Liverpool, and they're just going to hate each other forevermore, kind of thing. But I've never met an angler that I couldn't speak to, you know, happily, kind of thing, except for the fact that a lot of them feel obliged to get angry with you because what they've rented is exclusive access to that stretch of river. One of the most interesting counter arguments to our Right to Roam website and all of the details and sort of ideals that we put across on there is this sense that nature's in such a precarious space at the moment that that what we need to do first with priority is rewild an area. And then maybe at some time we can have a look at, you know, reconnecting people to it. But again, the science has proven, there was a report on the BBC just a couple of months ago, people with a regular active care and connection to nature care more, not just about their local environment and campaign more, you know, to stop the trees being felled or to stop sewage overflow pumping through our rivers or runoff from pesticides and stuff, but also they take more active positive decisions and acts towards the environment as a whole. So I guess what we're saying is we need people to viscerally care about their local environment, and they're just not going to when the idea of nature is so abstract and removed from our daily lives. It's no wonder that computer games or TV or all of those distractions seem more urgent. If you turned off the TV and said that there's a brick wall between us and the TV and no one's allowed to see the TV anymore, there would be a nationwide outcry. Just as if you put a wall around the lakes in Estonia or blocked off with razor wire the rivers in Finland, as they are literally all over England, there would be a revolution. The problem is we have become so inured and so used to this sense that this is not for us, that this belongs to someone else, that again, we've essentially forgotten what we've lost. But through mental health, through you know, obesity or heart disease, the NHS is fully aware of the repercussions of what we've lost. It's just we've forgotten of that link between our spiritual and physical and mental health, and you know, the bird song that we need to hear, and the swimming, just the sensation of you know, flowing water over your body and suspending you, is something that we actually deeply need.
I think some of the bad behaviour, like in Sheffield, kind of managing the Facebook group, we have some swim spots that, as you say, like in lockdown especially, they got abused, And I think part of the issue is because we're not allowed to be in these places, and there's like a lawlessness of it. You can almost see it in people's eyes. They're like, you're not meant to be here. I'm not meant to be here. Let's cut down this tree and have a big bonfire on the moorland, or just get paralytic drunk and leave our £5 Argos tent behind in the morning. Like, you can tell that there's this kind of just irresponsible attitude that's going on, and I do think that is partly because it's like none of us belong here, and like these the people who are behaving like that as well, like they don't feel like they can belong there, like they can be a part of that landscape, because they know that they had to climb over a wall to get to it to start with.
Completely. Like, just up the canal from me, and actually just the canal runs along the River Avon, and just up at a place called Whalley Weir, there's this by all accounts just a brilliant guy called Johnny Palmer that bought the island. He's a very successful entrepreneur, but he's gunning to get clean water, bathing water, the EU standard of clean water, so that people can bathe there. And he's entirely encouraging he's planting fruit trees so that people can pick fruit when they come down to Whalley Weir. But he talks about the Pygmalion effect, which is recognized in psychotherapy probably. It's a sort of this idea that people will act the way that you expect them to. By telling people that they are one thing, you make it twice as likely that they will actually do that. Sometimes just to spite you, and other times just because they really are, you haven't really given them another option. If you were to give people the ability to treat the natural resources that we have in this country as something, and I don't want to put people off by saying this, but this is just my personal response to it, as something that is basically as close to sacred as I ever need to get. The idea of dropping a Whisper Gold wrapper, or just leaving your barbecue there, I don't know many Catholics that would do that on the altar of the Vatican kind of thing. And neither would I. I mean, I've even tried leaving a Yazoo bottle in the woods one day just to see what it felt like. It just didn't feel right. But people, it's very easy for people to blame that other people are inherently corrupt, are kind of just bad eggs. But to look at it more systemically, to look at the infrastructure of how people have got there, it's because they've been divorced from the experience of nature and been able to experience it in a way that really chimes with them. If my experience of nature was just rambling, then I have to confess I probably wouldn't do it very much. As soon as I was, no offense to rambling, but for me, swimming in a river is just it. There's like, that's how and I'll walk to the river, but people need to be able to find their own prism through which really ignites their own passion. And everything about a river, the herons, the kingfishers, the otters, when fishermen pull out, I'm obsessed with barbel at the moment. They're just these sort of crazy prehistoric monsters with like catfish with huge long sort of beards. They're just incredible. But people need to be able to forge their own relationship in their own way in order to genuinely care about it. And if you don't let them do that, then largely, especially in lockdown, I think the piles of nitrous oxide gas, the tinnies, I think what was really happening there was the pub and club culture, all sort of fabric was shut. So you just take all the drugs that you would have taken in fabric to the countryside, which fundamentally I've got nothing wrong with, because there's many ways to enjoy nature. But that sense that actually in a pub and club, no one brings a bag with them and takes their plastic beer glasses home with them. No one sweeps up their own fag butts from outside the club. there's also a sense we have to acknowledge that we live in a disposable culture, and some of the responsibility at least has to be put on that as well. Something needs to be, or we actively need to change that in our children's minds.
Yeah, do you know, like talking about how when people are engaged with it, they're much more responsible. We've got a really good example in Leeds. There's an RSPB reserve, and before it was made a reserve, people were swimming in a lake there, which is, I think it's an old gravel extraction pond, and people were swimming there, and then it got started to be managed by the RSPB, and you know, there was a bit of kind of, the RSPB weren't quite sure how to handle it. Should we be allowing swimmers? And it's like complicated situation. But the RSPB, the swimmers turned out to be the biggest group of volunteers on the. So like the people were more than happy to give something back to the reserve, and obviously, you know, they wanted to invest in their local area. And like I'm sure that if Yorkshire Water, like where we swim in a lot of reservoirs, if they said, oh look, we're doing some conservation work this weekend, we're doing we're whatever it might be, planting some trees, all these kind of things, I'm sure that swimmers would be more than happy to go and volunteer and help with those things. But obviously that's like probably a few years off right now. Right now, Yorkshire Water are building big fences to keep us out. They're not, you know, inviting us to come and plant trees. But
well, to be honest, I don't think that we, this is just, you know, like lifting the hoods on our campaign strategy. I don't think that we even deserve a right to roam unless we, the people that are campaigning for it, or the people that desire it, have an answer to the litter problem and vandalism. And there's so much that can be done, but fundamentally, this to me, this all boils down to this old paradigm of the commons. The commons was the word that we called these resources, whether it was water meadows or agricultural field, pasture land, forests or rivers. The commons were the shared resources between the local people that lived there. But the commons sort of still lives on in Linux or Wikipedia, this idea that you are allowed to take from it only if you have a responsibility to maintain or to give to it as well. And when these commons were enclosed and parceled off into private ownership, they didn't just take our rights to the land with it, they took our ability to be responsible to the land. You know, there's no way that I can conduct a moth research, expedition on the Duke of Beaufort's land. I can't count how many earwigs there are in, on the Duke of Buccleuch's estate, because he's not going to let me. There is, I don't want to say army, but there is a huge network of people that are actively engaged, from like Surfers Against Sewage or Trash Free Trails, people that actively defend nature and work to make it better, who don't own any of it, who don't have any rights to enjoy the rivers that they're cleaning. There's so many people ready to go, ready to experience, because essentially it just clearing up litter or sort of repairing dry stone walls or whatever basically allows you to get knee deep in the nature that you like, and it's just enjoyable. We know this living on a boat. Sometimes it's nice to go out and do a hard day's work in the sun or the rain or it's something else to do in nature, and it makes your body feel great. So I do think there is an enormous appetite for people to go out there and improve the world. And I think that has to happen at exactly the same time as we're given our rights to do so, basically.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I thought it would be really good to get onto a little bit of the nitty gritty of water access and land access to water. Just to give like a brief overview. So the Crow Act, which is about our right to roam on access land, that came in about 20 years ago, right? Is that right?
20 years ago. last November. Yeah, just a couple of months ago was the 20th anniversary.
And then in your book, you kind of explain about how we roughly have access to roughly 8% of the land in the UK and about 3% of the water. And I just wondered if you could explain what does that mean? What is that 3% that we have access to? Why don't we have access to the rest of it? Is any of this kind of contentious or not? Because there's also things that I've heard about this public right of navigation as well.
But have you heard of the name, the Reverend Douglas Caffin? Has that come across your?
Only in your book, yeah.
Only okay. Only he's one of the most enigmatic. I still haven't met him yet, but as it stands, and it's largely the anglers, though I have nothing against anglers, but it is largely the angling community that are pushing forward this idea that unless it has been specifically, or a river has been specifically dedicated in a specific act of parliament to public access. So the Thames would come under that. The Kennet that we were on just before we got on the canal is part of that. And basically 3% of all English rivers have been over history, largely through the Tudor period, the 1600s, certainly the ones that are relevant to me. Unless they have been specifically dedicated by an act of parliament, you have no right to be there. You can't walk by the side of it unless there's a specifically dedicated public right of way, and you certainly can't kayak in it, and you certainly can't swim or paddleboard on it. About maybe 5 years ago, a retired army reverend went and did an MA in law and wrote his thesis on how actually this was just a contrived, and the more I read into it, because I think my next book will be to do with rights of access to rivers, it seems like it really sort of kicked off in the Georgian era, when people were actually starting to divide up, not just like you owned the land, but you owned all the rights that were conjoined with the land. So that would be the hunting rights, or the rights to mine its minerals, or the rights to rent it out to fishermen. All of these were called its perquisites. And as soon as you divided up land into the other stuff that you could make money from, all of a sudden it just became even more heavily defended. But the Reverend Douglas Caffin and various other sort of scholars of law have put forward this idea that there is a specific act in the Magna Carta which specifically prevents weirs and fish garths, which was basically areas areas of the river that you would sort of block off so that you could allow fish to spawn there, so that you could make money through fishing, or just through fisheries selling the fish as meat, which specifically banned weirs and fish garths from all English rivers. The thing about that would mean that was because there was a sort of given right of access before there. And everything we know about human civilization suggests that rivers were central to urbanization, or like the building of major hubs and ports, not only because of water supplies and the ability to get rid of sewage, but also because they're just the number one highway. Before diesel or before the trains, rivers were how you transported stuff without actually having to lug it on horseback over all the the crap mud roads that existed there. So this idea that there is no public right of navigation to rivers does sort of spit in the face of everything we know about human civilization. And yet it persists because one lobby group, the anglers, have since the Georgian era had total dominion over the river. That's not to say that they own all the rivers, but the people that own all the rivers make the most amount of money by renting space day by day to fishermen. And actually kayaking or paddleboarding or swimming is quite hard to turn a coin on, because like, how do you officially, you as a swimmer or me as a kayaker, need the written permission of every single person whose property we pass as we go along the river? Because if you own the land adjoining a river, you also own all the way up until halfway into the river. And even that's not true, because the real law is that you own it to the thalweg. This is getting, I mean, you did want to get nitty gritty, but do you know?
No, do you know, I love this thing. I love this thing about is it thalweg? I love this thing
I've
because...
no idea. I've only read it. I've no idea how to pronounce
so
it.
it basically means the deepest part of the river, right?
Yeah.
So that's totally fine. I'm happy for it to go to the deepest part of the river, because I'll be like, hey, you go and get your measuring stick. I'll have my swim, and we'll deal with it when you get back with your measuring stick, and we'll figure out which is the deepest bit of the river. Obviously, by which point I've swum off down the river, I've got too cold and I've got out, and I'm there with a hot water bottle. But it's like, yeah, I like, it's these nitty gritty details that it's like, well, let's figure out where the thalweg is. This will be a team building exercise.
But the thalweg, of course, will change depending on the river's flow over a decade, or depending on the topography around it, how much rain has fallen, how many beavers there are around. Like that's another. But the point is, there's also so much. Can I just say, while we're on the topic of it all being mental, basically, like there's so much. There's so much about river law that is impossible to really, for property law to grab onto, because rivers are not just like flowing bodies of water. They also swerve and meander and change. So lawyers have and will continue to argue, if I'm landowner A and you're landowner B, and over 10 years the river has taken my land through erosion off of my, from my bend, and deposited it down onto your land, lawyers will argue for, till the cows come home, over who owns that land. It's my soil, but it's now rested in your area. And property law just can't explain it. It just doesn't know what to do with it. And so there's something about rivers where this kind of fixed notion of this is mine and it's not yours, and it sort of only feels like mine because it's 100% not yours. You don't have any rights to it, therefore it's completely mine. Rivers just dissolve that kind of constructed logic. Also, now I'm delving into some of the, the real dense law books on the history of river law. There's this sense that actually there's lots of laws that kind of safeguard. If I'm 20 miles upstream from you as a landowner, I have responsibilities to you, because what I put into my bit of stream, or the water that I abstract from it, or what I do with my bit of river, completely affects you. So the law of rivers understands that we're a community connected by a river. It just pretends that the 99% of people that don't own a bit of river aren't part of that community and don't have rights to it.
So we've got this. So currently, when you're not on the 3%, where you actually have an explicit right to go boating or swimming, essentially you're kind of supposed to get permission from the landowners on whichever side of the river you choose to swim on the thalweg of. When you're navigating your thalweg. So if you're going to the left of the thalweg, you should have written permission from the landowner. I mean, I'm saying this kind of hypothetically, because in all reality, we've got to be honest, like nobody does that. So it's kind of like you are a complete pedant, which is what I love, like all in the books and the detail and understanding it. And I think we kind of share that. But we also have to be honest about just because I want to make sure that people feel like they can go out swimming and not be put off by this 3% number. Like where I swim here in Surrey, I swim down, and there's a big public garden on one side, and there's a golf course on the other, and they own the banks. And I swim down, and I don't ask either's permission. Neither of them care. They don't know. They don't care. Even if they did know, they probably wouldn't mind. But it's just like this kind of like, we're trying to encourage people to go swimming and say, hey, you're generally fine, at the same time as saying, but deep down there's a real big problem, because your right to be there and to do that swimming isn't actually explicit. You know, the government aren't actually backing you on this one.
Yeah.
Like we don't really have a right to be there, which is a really rubbish position to be in. And like even on access land, so this is what I only realized recently, on access land you are not allowed to swim in the lakes, rivers, whatever's there. So like a lot of the spots that we have that we've always thought, oh, like we're allowed to swim here, which are on access land, we're not actually allowed to swim in those places either.
I mean, this is supposed to be embarrassing. I should have kept this quiet, but I didn't know that. I knew that there are old paths, like they might be called Ferry Lane or Barge's Way or something, that kind of all over the country. That they essentially, they're old tracks that lead to the river, and so you have a right, because that is a right of way. You have a right to swim in the kind of vague vicinity of the mouth of that path, basically, as it tributaries into the river. As I understood it, you were allowed to swim from the banks of common land, and there's bugger all common land left, you know, compared to all of England, which was once common. But still, I thought there was that, but I actually didn't know the
yeah. You're also not
detail.
allowed to forage on access land. It's like explicit in the thing. But I mean, what I just wanted to say,
well, I'll just say, we'll just add that to the list of our demands. We'll just bump that up, because because that's mad.
We're just about to get to 9 o'clock. I think I'm probably going to get famous for running over time on these things, but it's always like we always get to the nice juicy bits just when I'm meant to be wrapping it up. I just want to say thank you for everyone who's been sticking with us up to this point, and if you can make a donation to ShAFF, then it would be much appreciated. The money gets split between ShAFF and the speakers. I mean, I'm on like minimum wage right now, and I don't know about you, but you know, any help is much appreciated, and we don't take it for granted. And quite a lot of work goes into putting these talks on. So and like ShAFF is an amazing platform. They, you know, adventure films, documentaries, talks like this. They're doing really good for supporting people doing interesting things. So just like give them some thanks. But if you're happy, like we'll go on for a little bit more, and then we'll try and.
Oh, have we lost Owen? Oh no!
It's a one-man show. So something happened then. He dived down to the floor, didn't he? Okay.
Gravity got too strong for him.
I'm going to stand in for Owen then, until he comes back online. I'm going to look out for him in the waiting room. Okay, so Anna's been fielding some questions. Oh yeah, he's just messaged to say that he's lost some connection. Excuse me. All right then. So I've got a few questions for you here. Well, actually, I'm going to throw one. Yeah. Okay. Where do riparian rights fit in with this?
Oh, and what we've been talking about are riparian rights. Riparian rights is the sort of legal term for the rights of an owner to, and actually responsibilities of an owner of a riverbank, and therefore the bed of the river, and that there's sort of an assumed extension that applies to the flow of water as well. So what we're talking about are riparian rights. The strangeness here, and this is another one of the things that property law hasn't really just got a grip on, can't really define it, is the Crown, our, you know, God save our gracious Queen. She owns the water. The landowner owns the bed, but for some reason, even though we're only touching the water and we are loyal subjects to Her Majesty the Queen, the law still, in a way, it's called a legal fiction, which is sort of a polite way of saying the law pretends that you are damaging the landowner's property, or which is in law kind of seen as an extension of themselves. So you are damaging the landowner by floating, if it's, you know, like in space, like several meters above their land. It's the wrong approach for us to take to just simply illustrate just how mad the law is, and how far away these legal fictions are from the lived experience of nature. So we're ignoring them. But while we're on the topic, yeah, there's I think Owen was saying how I like to get into the detail of it. I think only when it's as surreal and as kind of absurd as it is, it's almost funny.
Well, he's not. Oh, yes, right. Here we go. He's just come back on, so I'm just readmitting him. So hopefully we'll see him in a second.
Because he was really building up to something there, wasn't he?
He was. Hopefully he's been genning up on some questions whilst he's been offline.
Owen.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah. Great. Just my I didn't realise that I'd kicked my my plug out of my laptop charger, and it had been losing charge and went off. Anyway.
It was all getting very exciting. I don't blame you.
Great. So what are you, sorry, are you in the middle of a question, or are you all right?
No, perfect timing.
I was going to so are you going to include reservoirs in your right to roam campaign, or any other bodies of water, like water more broadly, so lakes and reservoirs and ponds and other such water? Well,
maybe not garden ponds, because that will well, rightly piss off some people. I want to be honest with you, Owen. Like me and Guy are just two people. Guy's now a really good friend of mine, and we're just two people that looked into it and saw that something had to be done about it. But we don't see this as our campaign at all. And we literally came up with, you know, the criteria of 4. Just sat in Guy's kitchen one night. What we really want to do is launch this conversation, and then through speaking to people that have much greater expertise, such as yourself, with I'll be honest, I never even thought of the reservoirs. And I know this is probably coming across as really unprofessional, but the bog standard truth is we're not professional. We're just doing this in the evenings whilst we, you know, freelance for work in the daytime. Our ambition is to get it bigger. Our ambition is to, we're going to go on something of a tour, a magical mystery tour next year, to go to places like Sheffield, Bristol, Sussex, places that are effectively radicalized to this sense of how urgently we need nature. But primarily, we're not there to tell, we're there to listen. And speaking to you earlier, when you said about reservoirs, before we came on to do this, like, I guess my heart kind of I was like, well, yeah, of course. And another one that we hadn't thought of is mountain biking. And I guess I kind of shied away from mountain biking because I kind of thought of, I could see the landowner's point of view of how much damage the tires might do. But again, through releasing the book and doing these kind of podcasty, Zoomy things, I've started speaking to a lot more mountain bikers, and Dom from Trash Free Trails. And so we're in an open process of learning. But again, I would call that part of the commons. We have open ears, not just to different activities in the countryside, but also to different marginalized people that have been traditionally ignored by the countryside. So we're actively, this is the year that we're actively going out to people to discuss with them. I think, can I just say, I think there is like a kind of a conversation going on as well about, like, for example, with mountain biking, we currently have this situation where what you can do on a path isn't necessarily, well, it's not related at all to what that path is most suitable for. So, for example, out in the Peak District, you can go up and mountain bike up some peaked quagmire, and you can actually ride a bike along that. And then when you get to the top, you'll probably come to a really nice stone path, perfect for cycling along, like a really durable surface, but you're not actually allowed to cycle along that. Mm-hmm. And like we have the same, you know, it's exactly the same problem in swimming. Is like, oh, we're allowed to go to the sea. This is something Susie talked about last week. You know, you're allowed to go to the sea. You can swim in the sea. You can deal with currents,
tides, you know, or huge waves, but a very, very still, flat as a pancake lake inland that happens to be a reservoir at one end of it, but the rest of it is essentially just a lake. No, you definitely cannot swim there. But I just wanted to, I was just going to show a map that I made. I've had a fantastic hour before this, marking over 250 reservoirs on a map.
Oh, you'll get a
just to show. I mean,
shrub soul for that. He loves a bit of map making.
Yeah, I know. I mean, he's probably not doing it on Microsoft PowerPoint though, like I am. So I think I'm sharing right now. So yeah, so this is like the kind of area that I live in when I'm not working in Surrey. So Sheffield's down in the bottom, and we go over to Blackburn and Bradford, Leeds. So this kind of area on that map, I've just marked really quickly every reservoir that I could see. The ones that are in the corners, like the empty spaces in the corners, that's just because I couldn't be bothered to go into those areas. I'd already done 250. Sorry, I appear to be drawing big red squiggly lines all over it. That doesn't mean anything. So that's over 250 reservoirs. I found this little online tool that you can calculate the population. That area has about 5 million people living in it. You basically cannot swim in any of those reservoirs. A very small handful will have open water swimming clubs on, where you can pay, and when the water's, you know, at a certain temperature, you might have to wear a wetsuit and this kind of thing. I'm not dissing open water venues. Everyone, you know, they're a fantastic thing that we have for people that use those. But in terms of the right to go and swim for free, this is a place that I think would be amazing to target. And
it's just on that.
I'm not trying to like offload this on your campaign. Sorry.
No. I'm like, we'll have this. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Like, just a real quick note on that sense of, yeah, any organisation that actively encourages people to experience the outdoors. Of course, they need to pay for their website and to pay their staff, and therefore, of course, there needs to be, a point of sale charge. But the problem is, if that is our only legal option to access nature, then that excludes people that can't buy a packet of pasta for their kids. Like England has been in 10 years of austerity. We're about to hit a Brexit recession and a COVID recession. People are, and will continue to, and probably get worse, really, really struggling. Sorry, I've just heard that this is my chance to be useless now. I've got 2% remaining on my phone, and that's my internet. Can you give me 2? I'm so sorry about this.
Yeah.
I'm just going to try and plug it in.
I'll tell you what, while Nick's doing that, I just wanted to, I prepared a few little photos, which is something that I wanted to show about, like, how when we think about trespassers, like, I think this is what people actually think of. Sorry, I'm just going to exit out of this to try and get away from those red lines that I put all over everything. Yeah, so I think this is kind of what a lot of people might think about when they think of trespassers, is like some kind of murky character, climbing over your garden fence to pinch your petunias or, whatever. This guy apparently had been like stealing leaves from someone's garden. Nick, welcome back. I was just showing people a few things that I prepared about, like, what we think trespassers look like. Like, this might be like what people are afraid of that they're going to have. That's you in a few years, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. I've done all right.
But then, like, the reality is, like, would you say, these are some of the fences that have been put up pretty much in direct response to all the people swimming in reservoirs because SOUP has encouraged them to do it and enabled them to do it by giving information. But, like, is this a filthy criminal? Is this a reprobate? Someone just enjoying taking in the water? Are these women? Yeah, I think they're veg tramplers. They look like the type, don't they?
Where are they running from?
So this is at Chatsworth, and although you are allowed to, swimming is tolerated at Chatsworth. on their website, they are quite clear that you're not allowed to swim. Chatsworth are really good, I must say. I'm not dissing Chatsworth at all. They're fantastic, and they let people get on with it, and they let people have free access to big parts of the estate as well. So I'm not dissing them. But this is kind of like, is this and someone who's come out of their wheelchair to go for a swim? Are they the kind of filthy criminals that we should be excluding from these places where they don't have right to go swimming?
Yeah.
Like, I want this guy. You don't want this guy. He's great.
Nudity is another thing. God damn, the English are so scared of nudity, aren't they?
Yeah, I know.
I only started wearing Speedos when I was going to the Avon, because I suddenly realised it got so cold that I was wearing gloves and those little boots. He's brilliant, by the way.
Yeah.
And it just felt weird coming out of a river naked, except for a woolly hat, pair of wetsuit gloves and some boots. So I've decided to put Speedos on again. But he's definitely
free the Speedo. I heard you say in another podcast, in a podcast somewhere, about how you like whimsy. You want to use whimsy. You want to use kind of twee and eccentric, and use these things because they're disarming. No one can like come at you when you're dressed as a merman or mermaid. Sorry, I shouldn't assume the gender of the mermaid. Like these kind of like really beautiful acts, really calm, very peaceful. You talk about having music. If you want to organise some mass trespasses, you're talking about having music and having ecologists come along and talk about the local plants, and we can learn about things. And I think that's a lot like with SOUP. I think that's kind of what we try and do, is we always try and put a kind of a funny twist on it to disarm people, because essentially they're looking at, really sad to say, they're looking at a criminal act right here. You're looking at people doing something that the law does not support them to do.
Can I just say a word on that? Because there is, England is having itself a right old crisis at the moment. Like where's our position in the world, and like how big are we, and how strong are we, and all of this kind of thing. And actually, there is an England that has always been queer and multiracial and accepting of queerness, difference, eccentricity, and that is the England of the Commons. And like chapter 8, the hair chapter in my book, goes into how that sort of communitarian welcomingness of England was eroded by just privatizing all of the places for people to express their weird, joyful commune with nature and each other. The book goes into, that's basically my analysis of the witch hunts in England. These strong, powerful women that were kind of no longer under the aegis of any kind of patriarchal rule. These knowers of herbs and these kind of psychotherapists, these kind of doctors before doctors, were just weeded out like the weeds of the Commons, and all manner of eccentricity and kind of horizontal power share was just put on the cross by this kind of monoculture of private property that just said, we're going to convert this to whatever way is sufficient to put coin into the landlord's pocket. And this guy, oh no, hang on, he's doing that because of the litter. Should we have a word on the litter? Because there are lots of, it does tie into this idea of the Commons as well.
Yeah, I was just going to, I covered this story a little bit in last week's talk, but just to explain that this guy, he's trespassing. He's in a quarry in Derbyshire, and he picked up an absolute mammoth load of litter all on his own. And then he drove around local supermarkets to offload the litter into their bins, and they would all only take a few bags.
Yeah.
And
what's his name?
And then he left it totally spotless clean. Yeah, Tom. His name's Tom.
Do you know him?
And yeah, no, he's amazing. He's the lovely Mer person.
Oh, I didn't recognise.
And this was actually, I mean, this made the local news, and like, you know, for the most part, comments were very positive. It's like, fantastic, look at this guy, hero. But some of it was just like, well, he shouldn't be there. So, do you know what I mean? He shouldn't be there anyway. It's like, well, the landowner's not dealing with it. I mean,
but
it's the turds who left the litter who are to blame, obviously. But you know.
But there is a gargantuan, like this notion of private property. The book goes into it as well. Kind of really began or was based on a lot of John Locke's writing. And that they were just, him and his contemporaries were basically people that were trying to work out what is the best way to run the nation, to run a state, and to like to protect people from invasion and other people doing harm to them. And actually the logic that they began with has just become extrapolated to the point that yeah, if you're there picking up tons of litter, the gut reaction to a certain amount of people in their guts will be, you had no right to do that. And we've lost, it's like we've sort of lost this sort of common sense of let's just treat the world as if, you know, as if it's ours in a way. Like let's love it. But actually, private property, people sort of have accepted that should be the thing that stops you from doing that. And no one tried to explain itself, because largely most of the rules that keep it set in stone were made by an unreformed parliament that was comprised entirely of the landowning class. That was the designation which got you into parliament, which got you the right to actually make these laws, which protected your own interests. It's a stitch up, but the book says it slightly more elegant.
Yeah. No, I think this is really important, is understanding, like, as you say, a lot of this land was common land before, and it was taken through a process which, you know, if you're to really shine a light on it, you'll see just how flimsy it is. You know, in terms of it, was it a fair way of doing things? Is that, if we were to do this today, would we tolerate it? Would we let this happen? Yeah. And I mean, you go into that a lot in the book. I think we're kind of pressing on for time. There's always talk about this thing of, we should do a mass trespass, especially like in our area with swimming. We're dealing with Yorkshire Water sending out people with guard dogs to come and tell us we can't swim, who patrol around just looking for swimmers. We've had people at reservoirs claiming that they'll take photos of us and use the photos and our registration to get our name and address and start prosecuting, which is all, we've debunked all this as well, like they can't do that. But everyone always says, let's do a big mass trespass. Do you think that, like, do you think that's going to work? Do you think it's helpful? How should we really go about bringing about change, other than joining your campaign?
Well, please do join our campaign, not just to you know, fill our ego boots, but so that we can actually get something done. We our number one thing, like, maybe a mass trespass is the answer. 2021 is definitely going to be the year that we start trespassing. I think our preference for this year is to do lots and lots of small trespasses, because number one, if we do a mass trespass through a woodland, we're going to get accused of trampling it, and you know, and fair enough, actually. There would be, if you've got 5,000 people to walk through a wood, that's not putting the wood first. So the whole ethic of our campaign is putting nature first. However, what we want to do is set up loads of localized Facebook, WhatsApp groups, loads of people such as all of you guys here. And what we want to do is basically centralize the sharing of the information about the trespass, because you can trespass and you can just jump over the wire and go for a walk in the woods or go for a swim with your mates, and you've done something for yourself. But if you trespass and you publish it, or if you trespass and you get the local paper involved, and if you've actually done a bit of research as to, like Guy did for his book and like I did for mine, as to what the historic, when it was enclosed and how many, what you just did there with the reservoirs, Owen, 5 million people, 250 reservoirs that they could share between them, and not one of them is open. If you actually construct a story and you do it on a local level, and then you take maybe 20 people to actually do the trespass with you, and you upload it onto the feature that we're working on our website at the moment, then actually, a little bit like the Me Too campaign or the Everyday Sexism campaign, you start to see this picture that enclosure is not something that happened all the way back when. It's still going on. The Duke of Buccleuch is cutting down something like 30 acres of woodland to put up three warehouses. The woodland was, something used for dog walking and stuff by all the locals around it. That doesn't tell the huge picture of land ownership in England. But for those local people for whom that woodland is something that they've known for the last 20 years and love, that is a real sense of loss. So our hope is to facilitate people to not just trespass it, but to basically, by broadcasting it, you turn a trespass into a direct action. And the direct action is a very efficient way to achieve the change that you desire. And don't believe them when they say it doesn't work. I've got a list as long as my arm.
I think as well that there seems to be this big value on, like, I know, for example, with establishing a new right of way, if you can kind of say, look, we've been walking this at least once a year for 7 years, I think it is, and you can kind of have some evidence for that, then that's how you can establish a new right of way. And we kind of have evidence that, for example, with swim spots, if you can evidence that people have been swimming there for quite some time, then that generally, is really in your favour. For example, at ShAFF Reservoir in Huddersfield, this is a place where people had swum for like 70 years. Kids, there's like old reports in the local newspapers of kids who did their like ShAFF mile there, and even Olympic swimmers would train there. And yet, like, not that long ago, only a few years ago, they tried to stop people swimming. And then because they were able to say, look, we've been swimming here for 70 years. How can you possibly stop this? That was basically that was like the number one reason. And then, the community worked with them. They did a risk assessment. That, as you say, there's a lot of responsibility in it and community involvement. But the number one thing was that that people had been doing it for so long. And that just made me think, right, this is a bit like planting a tree. It's like the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. So, and the next best time to plant a tree is today. Mm-hmm. So, and it's like that. It's like, well, we didn't start swimming in these reservoirs 70 years ago, but we started 4 years ago, which is not bad. So, like, do you know what I mean? You had to start somewhere.
No, you totally do. But for some reason, we accept this criteria for a path to become a legalized right of way. I think, I'm not sure, but I think it's 20 years. Who sets these arbitrary figures? And where is this sort of very conservative, and no offense to the blue voters out there, but where is this conservative mindset that because something happened way back when, once upon a time, that it's got any kind of more justification for happening right now? We're saying rivers are urgently needed for our mental and physical health. Look at the blue tits, all the wild swimming groups that are out there. Look at the British canoeing doubling its membership over lockdown. Look at the thirst there is for water out in England. I don't care if we didn't do it 20 years ago, 70 years ago, 100 years ago, whatever. We need to do it now. And there's this, I hear what you're saying, and let's use...
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Yeah, I totally
saying
agree
what you're
with you.
saying. Yeah. The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, definitely.
Yeah, well, we should really go to questions, basically.
I've got 14% on my computer now. I just want to apologise. It's just because we're on a boat in winter, and
Yeah.
like battery power is just
All right.
not a nightmare, but you know, near enough.
One thing people are asking is, so on a reservoir, you're not allowed. Some of them have a bylaw, and if the bylaw is signed at the site, we know then that bylaw stands, and that actually makes it a criminal offence to swim there. And we understand all of this. We on SOUP, if you want to know about it, you can join. Look in our announcements; it explains it very clearly. We kind of understand the law with that. The prosecution procedure for those bylaws is flimsy as hell, so you can actually just get around it really easily by never giving a name to them, and the police never have anything to do with it anyway, so it's really easy to avoid. But what I was wondering is, when there isn't that bylaw, so we're stepping off a public right of way and we're entering the water, what is that? Is that trespass?
Yes,
Right.
but the sign that trespassers will be prosecuted is just a lie, bog standard lie. What will happen to you if you get caught trespassing? You will basically be patronized by whoever decides it's their duty to patronize you, and then they will ask you to leave the land or the river. And if you don't do that, then they will say, I'm going to call the police. Most likely they will call the police, and the police will be like, mate, we've got a lot on our plates and this is not a problem. But if they are the Duke of Buccleuch and they carry some, you know, some sway, then maybe the police will turn up. And then if you refuse to leave, then the police can arrest you for a breach of the peace. But fundamentally, if you go on a trespass and you go swimming and someone comes along and starts to patronize you, and I say that as the nicest form of what they're going to do to you. They might also be aggressive, and I hate altercation. I'm not part of that. My advice would just be simply to leave, get the frustration out by going the next day. And if you go the next day and you take 5 people with you, and then you get caught again, then go the next day. And what they will try and do then is put out an injunction on you. And, you know, the people of Sheffield know all about injunctions. I cover the Sheffield Tree Action Group in the last chapter of the group, just of the book, just because they're just all heroes of mine, basically. What they did was just direct action, which achieved the aims they set out for. Just very simple. But they will try and put an injunction on you. But again, just like you said, if they don't know your name and they don't know your address, you know, not everyone's called Mickey Mouse. They'll start to smell a rat at some point. But they can't do anything with you. So this notion that a trespass is as bad as the gamekeeper will react as if it is, kind of thing, is just pantomime, basically. And fundamentally, make sure that you're polite and gentle and non-aggressive, and you won't get into any trouble whatsoever.
Yeah, that's great.
Because they have no power to put you in trouble.
I know that you kind of, I know kind of in your book and in other things I've heard you say, maybe it's just, can you hear me okay? Maybe It's just you kind of with your good boy shoes on. You say you're not actually encouraging people to go and trespass, and kind of, do you think that we can do this without actually encouraging people to go and trespass? Or do you think that we kind of actually have to do it to get there, to kind of get people involved and see how big the issue is, and see what's to be won as well, like these amazing places that we don't have access to?
Well, we're arranging something with XR at the moment that will be a very, very, very large non-trespass, which I think works just as well, as long as you advertise it brazenly in advance, then and as long as there's a wall of armed officers to stop you. That's all you need for the newspapers, and there's the issue raised. We're not going just for direct action. We've already written the amendment to the Countryside and Rights of Way Act that we want to see, that we're also producing, you know, memes and videos, and we're doing everything we can to raise the conversation. No, in the book, I was saying, let's redefine what our desire to access nature is. Let's not call it trespass with the, you know, sort of 4th century stone chapel, eternal damnation vibe to it. Let's call it responsible right of access. But that was the book, and now the book's come out. I'm 100%. I'm not encouraging people to trespass, because do what you want. Like, you're your own person, that's fine. But I am encouraging people to actively participate in a campaign that seeks to redefine what in England is considered a crime, to redefine it to, as it is in Scotland, just a basic human right.
Yeah, I think, like, I mean, this is a massive topic. I'm not gonna. I'm really unfortunately we don't have time to talk about this because it's so important. We will hopefully talk about it in 2 weeks' time when I talk to the Ed Accura of Black Swimming Association. But like, we just had a question come through. It's like, good point. You know, in relation to you saying that if you're nice, you won't be harassed when you're trespassing, and someone's saying, is that because you're white? And like, yeah. I think we're both probably more than, like, hands up, the privilege. Do you know what I mean? You know, no, it's not as easy for everyone.
100%. Yeah. But if you, you know, we are working with lots of sort of either nationwide or very local specific groups to completely change like right at the start of the talk, I said that the countryside of Way, we believe in it, but it doesn't do anything near as much as what it needs to do. It needs to spell out how people who have been actively marginalised throughout the history of land ownership in England, it needs to spell out how the countryside is going to reach out to them. So Land in Our Names is an incredible group. Flock Together is an incredible group for BIPOC people coming together to birdwatch. All of these people represent the groups that essentially there's this sort of equation that black means urban in England, and if you go 1 or 2 generations back, like, you'll realize that many of the people that are the diaspora of immigrants that came over to England were from agricultural communities. It's this new invention that is also relies on kind of spatial politics. Like, people are acceptable if they're in this little, like, sort of rounded off place, but not if they go into the countryside. I would advise to listen to Zakia Sewell on Radio 4. I was a small part of this radio series that she did, discovering what a person of mixed race heritage is, who is really into English folk music. Like, where does that sit in England's kind of biased narratives? But also the truth is, and there's chapter 5 deals with the legacy of slavery and the racism in the English countryside, and all the manor houses that were, you know, built on the back of African slaves, but also all the land that was enclosed. And actually the money from slavery just went and divested white working class people of all the lands that they had rights to. This notion that, how best to say, it's just another expression of class politics. And I'm fine in front of a gamekeeper because I put on my little Hugh Grant fiddly dee, ever so sorry kind of thing. I'm not just white, I'm middle class. There are working class people. Like, Rambling used to be a working class movement back in the 30s. If you go into Blacks and North Face, it's become another commercialized. It's for white middle class people with la-di-da lives and perfect teeth, and that's neoliberalism basically. That's just, you know, the right kind of person. This is for the person that can afford to buy it. So to whoever that said that, yeah, it is because I'm white and middle class. And I fully accept that, and I'm working, you know, literally every day to try and be a part of a movement that changes that as well.
Okay, I think we should really wrap it up. I know people probably need to get to bed and all the rest of it. I'm always happy, like at the end, like we'll say thanks and goodbye. If everyone wants to turn on their microphone and you can like shout whatever weird message you want to at us, that's always a load of fun as you're leaving. But I just want to say, you know, thank you so much, Nick, for joining us. It's been really good. I think we could literally go on all night. I think we've got to do this again. We've got so much to talk about. There's so much that we
we're coming to Sheffield, mate.
Yeah,
we'll come.